You mentioned roadkills, and there was this bill that passed the California legislature about the salvaging of the roadkill. But unfortunately, yeah, it didn't really go into effect that we still cannot salvage deer meat in California. Is there any hope of this coming back?
That was my bill that I carried for the California Deer Association. Yeah, that was Senate Bill 395, and we named it back in 2019. We named it 395. Why? Because 395, which is the
Yep,
the highway that runs up the
my
eastern
favorite
slopes,
highway.
was ground zero for roadkill. I mean, the deer were getting hammered over there. So when Senator Archuleta is the one that authored that bill, he asked me, he goes, "What do you want the bill number to be?" I said 395 because we wanted to name it after that. We did get the bill passed through the legislature. The way the legislature works, is a lot of times bills have to go through what they call policy committee first, right? And policy committee looks at the policy aspects of it. Does it or does it not make sense, so on and so forth. If they get out of there, if they've got a fiscal impact to them, if there's a cost to the state to that bill, they have to go to fiscal committee after that, where they don't look at policy. That was already done, and in policy committee, they look at the fiscal aspects. And a lot of bills, many good bills, a lot of bad bills too, will die in fiscal committee, which is also known as appropriations committee, because of the cost of the state. Depending on the state's financial status, this year's a tough year. Last was a tough year where they've got budget shortfalls and so forth. So what'll happen a lot of times, and this is what happened with Senate Bill 395 back in 2019, is we got the bill out of or policy committee on the Senate side, because got it out of a fiscal committee on the Senate side. Well, then it had to go to the Assembly because it was a Senate bill. It started over in the Senate first, right? Got it out of the Assembly policy committee. Then it went to the Assembly fiscal committee. They didn't want to let the bill out because they were afraid that it cost too much money. And the department put what they'll do is when they're analyzing the cost of a certain bill that's got a fiscal impact, they'll go to whatever agency is going to have to implement it and say, what do you think this is going to cost, right? And that agency will give them a number. Well, the department, this goes for all departments, but in our case, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, to take a position on a bill, they have to get the permission of the governor because they work for the governor. Department of Fish and Wildlife, I alluded to this earlier, doesn't ask for permission very often. They've only done it a handful of times in the 30 plus years I've been doing this on bills. So if they don't like a bill, or if they like a bill, they can have a little bit of control over the fate of that bill by what price tag they put on it, right? They didn't like Senate Bill 395 because it
Really?
required them to set up a cell phone app that kind of like the Waze app. If you have that, where if there's, if there's an accident on the road, if you got you know what I'm talking about with the Waze app, right? Somebody motorists are constantly updating that app because, oh, there's an accident. They go in their Waze app, boop, and the GPS of their phone marks right where that accident is.
Yep.
Or maybe there's a ladder that fell off the truck. Whatever. Car on the side of the road. Where are the cops at? That's on the Waze app, right? You can use the same technology for where these deer kill or elk kill, whatever maybe where those road kill are. That was the intent of Senate Bill 395, was to first establish this cell phone app. A lot of other Western states had already done it. It would have been cheap and easy. I talked to Idaho about this in detail. They were 10 years ahead of us on this. They said it was cheap. We just stole it from another state, updated it for our state. We were good to go, right? Well, the department didn't like 395, so when it came to the fact that they were going to have to establish a cell phone app, and then work on the permitting system, because you couldn't Joe just couldn't see a dead deer and go over there and start, carving it up on the side of the road. I mean, you had to get a permit first, but it was all electronic. It would have been almost instantaneous. And in getting that permit, you would also be telling the department where that roadkill was. So the intent of that bill was to establish roadkill salvage. As you mentioned, that was one of the intents. The primary, because we don't want to see all that food go to waste, right? You see it every time I
Right.
see a dead deer, fresh kill on the side of the road, it tears me up
It goes
because
to waste, right?
it's just going to rot, right? Or until Caltrans picks it up, whatever. But so that was part of it. The other part of it was the incentive for somebody who wants to salvage that bill to get that permit. That's data that can feed into this system. But if you're just driving along the road, maybe you have no interest in salvaging, a dead deer on the side of the road, but you can still put that location in, and I guarantee you people would be doing it. So, the number one thing, the number one shortfall of trying to put these roadway crossings for wildlife in the right spot is getting the data of where they are. That was the primary intent of Senate Bill 395, was to create that cell phone app and create a way to generate some rock solid real time data on where these deer, elk, whatever it may be, are being killed. So, because we're not going to put a roadway crossing in every 25 feet, that ain't happening, right? The one down south, I think $97 million. Most of them are more like 25, but still.
Yeah.
So the intent was to give Caltrans, give CHP, give the Department of Fish and Game good data on where these road kills are coming, and that was what 395. Now, to get back to your original question, what happened to it? It got hung up in fiscal committee. They went to the department and said, what's this going to cost? The department didn't like the bill, so they blew this big cost up. That's what went into the bill analysis. And so the committee comes to Senator Archuleta, who authored the bill, and says, we're not going to let your bill out unless, we can put language in it that says upon appropriation. You see this happen to a lot of bills, which means, yeah, we're going to pass into Law 395. It's going to have all that good stuff in it, but it's not going to be implemented until money is specifically appropriated for that purpose. So then the battle moves from, the legislature to the budget committees in trying to get that done. It didn't necessarily happen that year. It could have happened in subsequent years. I busted my pick trying to get them to allocate the money so we can implement that bill. Just didn't happen. A couple of years ago, was it 2 years ago now? We went to Senator Brian Dolly, from Northern California, and I took Senate Bill 395, updated all the dates in it, and ran the bill again so that we could have, a few more years to try to get that funding. That bill died in fiscal committee as well. So that's what happened on that. We got the bill passed, never got the money, authorized by the legislature to actually implement it. That issue is not going to go away. We're going to fight that fight again. It's just, let's get a new administration in. We have term limits in the legislature to let's get some changeover and recharge our batteries a little on that front, focus on some other stuff, and then we'll bring it back. I just think it makes so much good sense.